Good morning, Year 6, and welcome back to Monday's guided reading session. Last week we were halfway through chapter 5, and Bilbo and Gollum were in a. Well, he'd met this horrible creature, hadn't he? And they were having a battle of riddles. And either if Bilbo lost, he was going to get eaten, but if he wins, Gollum will show him the way out. So we were halfway through our battle of riddles. I'm going to carry on reading. It cannot be seen, cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelt. It lies behind stars and under hills, and empty holes it fills. It comes first and follows after. Ends life, kills laughter. Unfortunately for Gollum, Bilbo had heard that sort of thing before, and the answer was all around him anyway. Dark, he said, without even scratching his head or putting on his thinking cap. A box without hinges, key or lid, yet golden treasure inside is hid. He asked to gain time until he could really think of a hard one. This he thought a dreadfully easy chestnut, though he had not asked it in the unusual words, but it proved a nasty poser for Gollum. He hissed to himself, and still he did not answer. He whispered and spluttered. After some while Bilbo became impatient. Well, what is it? He said. The answer's not a kettle boiling over, as you seem to think from the noise you're making. Give us a chance! Let it give us a chance, my precious! Well, said Bilbo, after giving him a long chance, what about the guess? But suddenly Gollum remembered thieving from nests long ago, and sitting under the river bank, teaching his grandmother to suck. Eggses, he hissed. Eggses it is! Then he asked, alive without breath, as cold as death, never thirsty, ever drinking, all in mail, never clinking. He also, in his turn, thought this was dreadfully easy one, because he was always thinking of the answer. But he could not remember anything better at the moment. He was so flustered by the egg question. All the same, it was a poser for poor Bilbo, who never had anything to do with the water if he could help it. I imagine you know the answer, of course, or can guess it as easy as winking, since you are sitting comfortably at home and have not the danger of being eaten to disturb your thinking. Bilbo sat and cleared his throat once or twice, but no answer came. After a while, Gollum began to hiss with pleasure to himself. Is it nice, my precious? Is it juicy? Is it scrumptiously crunchable? He began to peer at Bilbo out of the darkness. Half a moment, said the hobbit, shivering. I gave you a long chance just now. It must make haste, haste, said Gollum, beginning to climb out of his boat onto the shore to get at Bilbo. But when he put his long webby foot in the water, a fish jumped out in fright and fell on Bilbo's toe. Ah, he said, it's too cold and clammy. And so he guessed, fish, fish, he cried, it's fish. Gollum was dreadfully disappointed, but Bilbo asked another riddle as quick as he ever could, so that Gollum had to get back into the boat and think. No legs lay on one leg, 2 legs sat near on 3 legs, 4 legs got some. It was not the right time for the riddle, but Bilbo was in a hurry. Gollum must have had some time guessing it if he had asked it another time. As it was, taking off fish, no legs, was not so very difficult, and after the rest was easy. Fish on a little table, man at a sitting stool, the cat's the bones. The cat has the bones. That, of course, is the answer, and Gollum soon gave it, though he thought the time had come to ask something hard and horrible. This is what he said. This thing of things devours, birds, beasts, trees, flowers, gnaws iron but still, grinds hard stones to meal, slays kings, ruins towns, and beats high mountain down. Poor Bilbo sat in the dark thinking of all the horrible names of all the giants and ogres he had ever heard of, told in the tales. But not one of them had done all these things. He had a feeling that the answer was quite different and that he ought to know it, but he could not think of it. He began to get frightened, and that is bad for thinking. Gollum began to get out of his boat. He flapped into the water and paddled to the bank. Bilbo could see his eyes coming towards him. His tongue seemed to stick in his mouth. He wanted to shout out, give me more time! Give me more time! But all that came out with a sudden squeal was, time! Time! Bilbo was saved by pure luck, for that, of course, was the answer. Gollum was disappointed once more, and now he was getting angry, and also tired of the game. It had made him very hungry indeed. This time he did not go back into the boat. He sat down in the dark by Bilbo. That made the hobbit most dreadfully comfortable and scattered his wits. "He's just got to ask us a question, my precious. Yes, yes. Just one more question to guess. Yes, yes," said Gollum. But Bilbo simply could not think of any question, with that nasty wet cold thing sitting next to him, and pawing and poking him. He scratched himself, he pinched himself, still he could not think of anything. Ask us, said Gollum. Bilbo pinched himself and slapped himself. He gripped up on his little sword. He even felt in his pocket without another hand. Then he found the ring he had picked up the passage and forgotten about. "What have I got in my pocket?" he said aloud. He was talking to himself, but Gollum thought it was a riddle, and he was frightfully upset. "Not fair! Not fair! It's not fair, my precious it is, to ask us what it's got in its nasty little pockets is." Bilbo, seeing what had happened and having nothing better to ask, stuck to his question. "What have I got in my pocket?" he said louder. "Sssss," hissed Gollum. "You must guess 3 guesses, my precious. 3 guesses." "Very well, guess away," said Bilbo. "Handses," said Gollum. "Wrong," said Bilbo, who had luckily just taken his hands out of his pocket. "Guess again." "Tss," said Gollum, more upset than ever. He thought of all the things he kept in his own pockets. Fish bones, goblins' teeth, wet shells, a bit of bat wing, a sharp stone to sharpen his fangs on, and other nasty things. He tried to think what other people kept in their pockets. "Knife," he said at last. "Wrong," said Bilbo, who had lost his some time ago. "Last guess." Now Gollum was in a much worse state than when Bilbo had asked him the egg question. He hissed and spluttered and rocked himself backwards and forwards and slapped his feet on the floor and wriggled and squirmed, but still he did not dare to waste his last guess. "Come on," said Bilbo, "I'm waiting." He tried to sound bold and cheerful, but he did not feel at all sure how the game was going to end, whether Gollum guessed right or not. "Time's up," he said. "String or nothing!" shrieked Gollum, which was not quite fair, working in 2 guesses at once. "Both wrong," cried Bilbo, very much relieved, and he jumped at once to his feet, put his back to the nearest wall, and held out his little sword. He knew, of course, that the riddle game was sacred and of immense antiquity, and even wicked creatures were afraid to cheat when they played at it. But he felt he could not trust this slimy thing to keep any promise at a pinch. Any excuse would do him to slide out of it, and after all that last question had not been a genuine riddle according to the ancient laws. But at any rate Gollum did not attack at once. He could see the sword in Bilbo's hand. He sat still, shivering and whispering. At last Bilbo could wait no longer. "Well," he said, "what about your promise? I want to go. You must show me the way." "Did we say so, precious? Show the nasty little Baggins the way out? Yes, yes. But what has he got in his pockets, is there? Not string, precious, but not nothing. Oh no, Gollum!" "Never you mind," said Bilbo. "A promise is a promise." "Cross it is, impatient precious," hissed Gollum. "But it must wait, yes, it must wait. We can't go up the nasty tunnel so hasty. We must go and get some things first, yes, things to help us." "Well, hurry up," said Bilbo, relieved to think of Gollum going away. He thought he was just making an excuse and did not mean to come back. What was Gollum talking about? What useful thing could he be keeping out of the dark lake? But he was wrong. Gollum did mean to come back. He was angry now and hungry, and he was a miserable, wicked creature, and already he had a plan. Not far away was his island, of which Bilbo knew nothing, and there in his hiding he kept a few wretched oddments, and one very beautiful thing, a very beautiful, very wonderful. He had a ring, a golden ring, a precious ring. "My birthday present," he whispered to himself, as he had often done in the endless dark days. "That's what we wants now. Yes, we wants it." He wanted it because it was a ring of power, and if you slipped that ring on your finger, you were invisible. Only in the full sunlight could you be seen, and then only by your shadow, and that would be shaky and faint. "My birthday present came to me on my birthday, precious," so he had always said to himself. But who knows how Gollum came by that present, ages ago in the old days when such rings were still at large in the world. Perhaps even the master who ruled them could not have said. Gollum used to wear it at first, till it tired him, and then he kept it in a pouch next to his skin till it galled him, and now usually he hid it in a hole in the rock on his island, and was always going back to look at it. And still sometimes he put it on, when he could not bear to be parted from it any longer, or when he was very, very hungry and tired of fish. Then he would creep along the dark passages, looking for stray goblins. He might even venture into places where the torches were lit, and made his eyes blink and smart, for he would be safe. Oh yes, quite safe. No one would see him, no one would notice him, till he had his fingers on their throat. Only a few hours ago he had worn it, and caught a small goblin imp. How it squeaked! He still had a bone or two left to gnaw, but he wanted something softer. "Quite safe, yes," he whispered to himself. "It won't see us, will it, my precious? No, it won't see us, and its nasty little sword will be useless. Yes, quite." That is what was in his wicked little mind as he slipped suddenly from Bilbo's side and flapped back to his boat, and went off into the dark. Bilbo thought he had heard the last of him. Still he waited a while, for he had no idea how to find his way out alone. Suddenly he heard a screech. It sent a shiver down his back. Gollum was cursing and wailing away in the gloom, not very far off by the sound of it. He was on his island, scrabbling here and there, searching and seeking in vain. "Where is it? Where is it?" Bilbo heard him cry. "Lost it, my precious! Lost! Lost! Curse us and crush us! My precious is lost!" "What's the matter?" Bilbo called. "What have you lost?" "Mustn't ask us!" shrieked Gollum. "Not its business! No, Gollum! It's lost! Gollum! Gollum! Gollum!" "Well, so am I," cried Bilbo, "and I want to get unlost, and I won the game, and you promised. So come along, come and let me out, and then go on with your looking." Utterly miserable as Gollum sounded, Bilbo could not find such pity in his heart, and he had a feeling that anything Gollum wanted so must much hardly come be something good. "Come along," he shouted. "No, not yet, precious," Gollum answered. "We must search for it. It's lost, Gollum." "But you never guessed my last question, and you promised," said Bilbo. "Never guessed," said Gollum. Then suddenly out of the gloom came a sharp hiss. "What has it got in its pockets? Tell us that. It must tell first." As far as Bilbo knew, there was no particular reason why he should not tell. Gollum's mind had jumped to a guess quicker than his. Naturally, for Gollum had brooded for ages on the one thing, and he was always afraid of it being stolen. But Bilbo was annoyed at the delay after all. He had won the game pretty fairly at a horrible risk. Answers were not to be guessed, not given, he said. "But it wasn't a fair question," said Gollum. "Not a riddle, precious, no." "Oh, well, if it's a matter of ordinary questions," Bilbo replied, "then I ask one first. What have you lost? Tell me that." "What has it got in its pockets?" The sound came hissing louder and sharper as he looked towards it. To his alarm, Bilbo now tossed two small points of light peering at him. As suspicion grew in Gollum's mind, the light of his eyes burned with a pale flame. "What have you lost?" Bilbo persisted. But now in the light in Gollum's eyes had become a green fire, and it was coming swiftly nearer. Gollum was in his boat again, paddling wildly back to the dark shore, and such a rage of loss and suspicion was in his heart that no words had any more terror for him. Bilbo could not guess what had maddened the poor wretched creature, but he saw that all was up, and that Gollum meant to murder him at any rate. Just in time he turned and ran blindly back up the dark passage down where he came, keeping close to the wall and feeling it with his left hand. "What has it got in its pockets?" He heard the hiss loud behind him, and the splash as Gollum leapt from the boat. "What have I wonder?" he said to himself as he panted and stumbled along. He put his left hand in his pocket. The ring felt very cold as it quietly slipped on his groping forefinger. The hiss was close behind him. He turned now and saw Gollum's eyes like small green lamps coming up the slope. Terrified, he tried to run faster, but suddenly he struck his toes on a snag in the floor and fell flat with his sword under him. In a moment Gollum was on him, but before Bilbo could do anything, recover his breath, pick himself up, or wave his sword, Gollum passed by, taking no notice of him, cursing and whispering as he ran. What could it mean? Gollum could see in the dark. Bilbo could see the light of his palely shining eyes from behind. Painfully he got up and sheathed his sword, which was now glowing faintly again. Then very cautiously he followed. There seemed nothing else to do. It was no good crawling back down to Gollum's water. Perhaps if he followed him, Gollum might lead him to the way of escape without meaning to.
Curse it! Curse it! Curse it!
Hissed Gollum.
Curse the Baggins! It's gone! Why's it gone in its pockets? Oh, we guess, my precious. He found it, he must have. My birthday present.
Okay, we're going to stop there for today and we're going to finish chapter 5 tomorrow. Well done for reading along with me because we read quite a lot today, and we're going to finish off chapter 5 tomorrow, and we'll see if Gollum leads Bilbo to the way out. See you later, and well done for reading along with me.